So every Rosh Hashanah, I try and think about some mantra, something that, some idea or something I want to carry into the new year. And I thought of something this year too I want to share with you. Many of you might not know that I love mysteries. It's the only kind of novel I really read, is mysteries. And that's what I really liked about being a physician. I loved the figuring out what was wrong, and I loved the mystery of trying to find a solution to a problem when the usual treatments were contraindicated. Solving a complex mystery. And there's one mystery writer I really love. Some people might be familiar with him, Michael Connelly. His central character is a detective called Harry Bosch. And I love Harry Bosch because he has this wonderful mantra that's going to be my mantra this year. When he talks about solving crimes, he says, everyone counts or no one counts. Everyone counts or no one counts. And in the setting of what he does, that's his way of saying that everyone deserves justice. Not just the high and mighty, but even the most marginalized people in our society. So that's what I think is really important for me this year. Everyone counts or no one counts. Before I sit down to write a teaching, and after I've written a teaching, because I'm a little nuts, I start to question whether it's really worthwhile. I say, is this something I really should go with? Is it interesting? Is it meaningful? And the universe has a very funny way of doing things. Just when I was really doubting this idea and whether I should present it to you, I got a call from Karen. And she said, Rabbi, we have a big problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, well, the church is honoring the homeless this Tuesday. And they're all going to be in front of the church, so we won't be able to come in the usual entrance. And we won't be able to park in the parking lot because there'll be showers set up, temporary showers. And I said, you know what? That's the message I need. The church was doing what I suggested. They were saying that everyone counts or no one counts. So then I felt much more empowered that this was the message that we needed in this time. So, unfortunately, it's not the poor and the homeless that seem to not count anymore. Our government has made a policy of really marginalizing immigrants so that they don't count and they don't belong here. I don't know about you, but my grandparents were immigrants. And I think if I looked around the room and asked you, many of you would tell me that your grandparents or your great-grandparents were immigrants. And when I look around the room and think about all the people here, I realize what these immigrants brought to this country to make it special. This country was founded by immigrants. That's the basic way the United States came into being. It was immigrants that made this country. So to say that they don't count, and to put them away, send them out, go hunting for them, and incarcerating even some of them that are naturalized citizens is just so wrong. It's just so wrong. They count, or no one counts. They count, or no one counts. Belle and I frequently visit our grandchildren in New York. And as we're flying into New York, sometimes we're blessed with seeing the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. And I've come to think about whether that plaque on the Statue of Liberty needs to be taken down, or the statue needs to be returned to France. Because I don't think right now that we want the world, or we say to the world, send us your tired, your poor, your humbled masses yearning to be free. As a child, when I was growing up in public schools in New York, I was really proud of this. I was really proud of this verse. It meant so much to me as an American. And I find myself standing before you and wondering whether it's still something we believe in. You know, the poor and the immigrants are not the only people who have been marginalized in our country. I think we can take a minute and we can think of other peoples who've been marginalized, like the innocents who live in war zones, and the special people who discover that their genetics don't fit their understanding of their gender, and the people who choose different kinds of people to fall in love with. These are all people that the country is now marginalizing. When they belonged here, they're part of everything. You know, one of the reasons I embrace this idea that everyone counts or no one counts is it's basically the core teaching in Judaism. Love your neighbor, love yourself. Take care of and treasure the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, all the marginalized and people on the periphery of society. This is an idea we need to teach. This is an idea we need to hold on to. We all come from the same source. We all trace back to the same genetics. We all have the loving energy of the universe coursing through us and connecting us. We all belong here. You know, when I was a physician and I was writing orders, you know, I was kind of like on the top of the hierarchy there. But I knew that my orders were meaningless unless they were carried out by nurses, technicians, hospital transporters, physical therapists, occupational therapists, that they all needed to work together. They all needed to work together for the order to mean anything, for the thing to work. And that's the way our country has to be. We all have to work together. We can't put people on the side and say they don't matter. There's a beautiful Yiddish saying about this idea of making sure everyone counts. It's that if you happen to be sitting next to someone who appears to be poor and sad and needing something, you should turn to them with a word of kindness. And you know what this Yiddish teaching teaches? That if you do that just one time, that person might be the Messiah, and it might herald in the Messianic age. So I hope I've gotten you a little interested in this idea that everyone counts or no one counts. And you know, it's not worthwhile giving a teaching unless you give some ideas about how to carry this out. And I've given you one: turning to people and being kind to everyone you meet. Another simple way to respond to this terrible problem of homelessness and poverty is you don't have to do something big like the church did, which I think is a great idea. In fact, I've always thought that religious institutions that don't do something for the homeless should lose their charitable tax exemption. That in order to get their tax exemption, they have to do some program or something for the needy in the society. But one simple way you can respond to this, and we try and do this whenever we can, is always put a few dollars in your pocket or put them in the glove compartment of your car. And when you see someone on the street, give them $1 or more. But I think it's not enough to give them $1 like you're making a deposit in your guilt bank so that you don't have guilt anymore. You really have to tell them that they matter. So I've gotten in the habit of not getting engaged in a long conversation with people, but at least talking to them, wishing them well, hoping that things work out for them, and sometimes even saying, "My name's Jason, what's yours?" That's the way you tell them that they matter. They're not irrelevant. They're not just nothing. And one final thought I have is, we're really lucky to have this Beth Or community. I think I can speak for Cantor and Andy and I, that when we sit in front of our Zoom screens or we sit around and we hear your voices joined in prayer, we know that you count. You matter to us. It's one of the real gifts we receive. So this year, I know that there's lots of things on the agenda. There are lots of things to do. Let's make a commitment to always gather together as a community when we have community events, both on Zoom, when we do our Friday night service and our Torah study, where your ideas and your answers to the questions that are posed during Torah study make it worthwhile. You know, Rabbi Roth welcomed all of you years ago, and here we are, still gathering years later, with Cantor and Andy trying to our best to embody that welcome energy and spirit that Rabbi brought to this room. Cantor and Andy and I feel privileged and honored to work with you. And we will do this work with great love and energy this year. And we will commit ourselves fully to this wonderful community we call Beth. Shana Tova.